Hi, RDG Books is proud to bring you episode 5 of Relax and Chat. This is a two-part episode. You're looking at part 1. There'll be a link in the description for part 2. We are very fortunate to have an acquisitions editor on the show today, Ben White from Running Wild Press. If you're interested in writing and publishing a story, this is a must-see episode. I think you'll really enjoy it. There's a lot of good information, and it's very entertaining. Mr. White is a very interesting fellow. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, Ben. How you doing today?
Good, Ron. Thanks for having me.
So why don't you, if you like, share a little bit about yourself for the audience, whatever you would like to tell everybody.
Sure. I'm Ben White. I'm out here in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, just outside of Albuquerque. But my wife's a native New Mexican. She was born and raised in Albuquerque. I was born and raised in Monticello, Kentucky, about 17 miles from the Tennessee border, and down south of Lexington. If you come straight up from Knoxville and over 30 miles, you're bound to hit Wayne County sometime. But specifically, I've been editing with Running Wild Press for about 5 years now, and I started off with him as an author, and just kind of moved up to be an editor, and then moved on up to be an acquisition editor to decide which titles we want to select and publish. So that's been exciting. It's been a whole new world of work for me to learn it as we go, but sometimes those are the best experiences.
Yeah, I've been learning as I go since day one. All right. Well, if you're comfortable with doing so, we'll jump right into a few questions.
Oh, please, of course.
This first one came to mind immediately, and I am cheat sheet. But I've heard of developmental, line, and copy editors. But for me, acquisitions editor is something new. So I was wondering, in that role, what do you do? What is an acquisitions editor?
A small press or any publication house, they've got to decide which titles interest them. So the acquisition editor is just that, to go through the submissions to see which novels or stories fit the press and which ones that we might be interested in publishing. And like I said, I'm the acquisition editor for Running Wild Press out of LA, and it's been a growing process. As we've grown, and now we're getting close to I'd say 120 submissions every quarter. So we get together, and we maybe not everybody has read the whole thing. Some of us have read some of it, and so we look for the writing and the story and the grab up front, the hook. And then we just have that discussion about works that we've gotten and that have been submitted. And so we make that decision. Do we want to acquire them? And there's the acquisitions part. Do we want to acquire them and go with them towards publication?
Oh,
so it's really that higher level editing of what are we seeing here? What can we work with? What can't we work with? Should we work with? Those type of decisions. And it comes down to especially with a small press where we simply don't have the time to read 100 in a quarter. That's a lot of books in a quarter of a year. Yeah. But so we rely on each other's opinion of what others saw. So we don't do it in a vacuum with just an individual making that decision. We come together as a team because the discussions, I've enjoyed the discussions in those meetings, because you learn from what other people look for and how they see a work that you may be in love with or may have hated, but they're more neutral, or they're the opposite end of the spectrum. So I love this because of the writing. I said, I didn't see it, but I'll believe you. So we have a good relationship there with the acquisitions team. And it's like I say, it's a resource issue. We can't read the whole thing, so we really got to. Sometimes it's depending on what the author tells us it's about and how written the tagline is and the synopsis of a story. Sometimes that sells us because hey, that's a great concept or a great story. We can work with this one. We can make this. We can flesh it out with a good editor. We can, if necessary. Sometimes you don't even need that much editing for a work.
Oh, but so for the writers, which most of my audience, they are writers, that synopsis is a very important part. Really,
absolutely
make that stand out, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
We can equate that to if there's any Shark Tank fans out there, when the people come in to sell their idea, that first 2 minutes when they tell the sharks what their idea is, that's the synopsis. That's the executive summary of what's going to get more questions and more interest, more attention. So it's key. And so that synopsis of the story or the novel that you submit is that executive summary. Get our interest there. You get our interest there, you've got us.
All right. Now, let's say that, I'm going to say very quickly, I really like hearing that it's a team that evaluates a piece. You know, it sounds very similar to being a writer. You absolutely have to have additional eyes. One set of eyes just can't get it done. And I feel very excited that, you know, with Running Wild Press, it's a team effort to evaluate, you know, because you're talking about sometimes years of somebody's work. And it's so cool that you all, you know, really put some thought and effort into making that decision. That's very nice to know, you know?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll move on to the second question. Okay, when you have decided this manuscript is good, we're gonna work with this one. At that point, do you consider yourself personally to be a developmental or a line or a copy editor or some mix of them?
What happens after we make the decision to publish a work? We'll shop it out to who we think is the right editor. We're a small press, but we've got a group of editors. So when I get the work assigned to me, I approach it with a mix of those to answer the question. With anything that needs to be polished or looked at or worked on or discussed even with the author, it will be. And my personal approach is to approach editing with the author, and that's not to the author and not for the author, but with the author. And I think it helps that author know that, okay, these suggestions are just that, they're suggestions.
So
if they work or they strengthen the work, then we'll go with it. But it's a discussion that follows that suggestion. So whether it's developmental, you know, I've seen works where it's something as simple as the font changing. You know, why would you change the font in the middle of your story? I'm going to change this back. What do you think? And I don't know how that happened anyway. But I've seen one that has a whole section in one place of the novel and the exact same section somewhere else, and it's just the author's editing. You know, it's you start looking at it so many times, you don't see it as the author. And you just say, well, that section's taken care of, so I don't have to revisit it. But that's what the editor can do, is say, well, we need to revisit this because there's no reason to have the same scene twice. You know, let's take it out with one place or the other. And it may work in both places, but you only need it once.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
And then there's some sections that we consider, does this section help advance the story? And is it necessary to advance the story? It's very well written and it's interesting, but it's got characters that don't, you know, they're kind of peripheral to the story itself. Do they need to be there? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes, but I need to explain why. And so I'll need to add some discussion to why they're there. And in some cases, those characters are so interesting that they can spin out of there and go be their own novel. You know, go tell that story, because they're a good bunch that, you know, you've got the core of another story. And so those type of things. And I like to read it as from a reader's point of view. If something confuses me as a reader, as I go through, I read it, not as an editor, but as a reader. And if you confuse me as a reader, you may be in danger of that actual reader putting the book down and saying, I don't get it. What happened here? Why is this in here? What happened? You don't want the reader to say what happened.
And I gotta say, I'm a writer myself, and one of the things that I've learned over a little over a year now is it's kind of intimidating when you think about approaching an editor. And I think anyone in my audience would probably be cheering that it's a collaboration with Running Wild Press. You'll collaborate with the author and work together to make that piece the best it can be. And you know, not so much just taking over the story, because you hear the nightmare stories that happen sometimes, you know. All right. This ought to be a fun question.
Oh, they all are.
What is your favorite part of your job? What do you enjoy the most? Why do you get up and go do this job? What's your favorite part?
I think it's the discovery of good stories. You know, the stories that have that hook and they draw you in with good writing. You can edit good writing, but sometimes or you can edit writing, but the story is the core. Is it telling me a story that I'm interested in? Is it carried throughout the novel? And there's times when we as acquisition editors will see a novel that has potential, but it's just not there. It's not competing with the others that we're looking at. And one thing that I like about Running Wild Press is we're open to sending that, even though it's a rejection, we'll send it back with feedback to say this, you know, we're rejecting it right now, but if you polished A, B, and C, please resubmit. And that's a good feeling to try to help an author. Sometimes the author says, no, you're crazy, and it's perfect the way it is, but and they don't take the feedback, but that's okay too. It's you know, we're seeing it from very subjective positions and perspectives. So, but to have that chance to send it back and tell an author, hey, we're interested, we just can't take it right now, but if you could polish this part, and that goes back to your point about editing and being able to edit your story with any feedback you get. Maybe it's, you know, across the kitchen table, say, why don't you make it this or that, or if it's coming back from a press saying, polish this area, and we'd love to see it again. And sometimes we've gotten them back. And the success story there is we've published things that when an author has listened to us to make it better, because we're all about making it the best work possible and polished. And that's the most rewarding aspect of it, you know, to have those conversations.
Yeah, sounds awesome. And it sounds great as a writer. In my personal experience, many of the publishers that I've sent some of my work to write it hello at their advertisement. It says, you know, send it in, but then if we don't want it, bye, see ya. You know, that's it, you're done. And I'm sure some of them really regret telling that fellow Stephen King to take a walk, you know. And you never know who's going to be the next big star. And you know, it's so nice that at Running Wild Press, you give every writer that kind of consideration. You know, I might be the weakest writer you've ever met, but you're treating me like Stephen King, and I love that. That sounds wonderful and welcoming to any writer, you know. So don't be surprised if after this show, you know, you get double the submission.
It comes from us being writers ourselves. From Lisa, the owner, she just published a book called Cure that it's written under a pseudonym of Callus Mati. Yeah, Callus Mati, I think. But it's out there, and if I don't get that author name right, I'm in trouble. Yeah. But the book is Cure, and it's and all of the editors that she has collected are basically writers themselves.
Oh, that's excellent.
It makes a difference of perspective. We know what hurts. We know when the rejection is a form letter and it's okay, you know, this is not the right place. It's the right story, just not the right place.
Yeah, I told someone recently on a social site that he said something about how hard it would be for me to take the criticism if I put my work up there. And I told him the truth, and I would say it to anybody. I have absolute respect for a good critique. Whether I agree with it or not, it's a real critique. Criticism, I dismiss it immediately. That's not a writer that puts 600 hours into trying to write a story, and God knows how many hours trying to edit one. You know, somebody criticized, you're too short, you're too tall. I don't care about that. I don't even want to hear it. And it's really nice that you, as an editor, will tell a writer, "Hey, your story's almost there. Give it a little bit more of this." And from what I've seen, very few publishing houses, at least at the level I've been able to reach to, very few give a writer that opportunity.
It's true.
It's very nice that Running Wild Press treats a writer like a person. That's awesome.
I've always appreciated it when one publisher said, well, we don't, it's not right for us at this time, but try this place, and they'll offer you other places to submit.
Oh,
that's supportive as well.
Yeah. Believe it or not, in my experience, small presses versus the magazines that you send your short stories to often. Believe it or not, magazines are much harder on the writer, in my experience. They're pretty blatant in their responses. Of course, I've had rejections. I'm not quite up there with that big Riddell with Stephen King, but I'm getting there. All right, now this one's kind of tough. I think this would be hard because you seem like a very caring man, and so I have to ask the question: what part of your job do you like the least? What's the hardest part of your job?
I think it's in rejections. The just seeing that, and again, as a writer myself, and to go back to see someone in the early stages of their writing career, and to recognize that where they are because you've been there. I've written some pretty junky stories. Oh. And they were rejected and should have been rejected. And so it's that honesty that comes with experience that, I understand why that wasn't accepted. And but sometimes that you are sending a rejection, say we can't accept your piece at this time. And maybe not even does it rate that kind of input to be encouraging. It's just you're just at the wrong place in your writing career for us at our publishing careers. Mm-hmm. And so it's and it's done, now it's done over not even a handwritten or a typed letter with a handwritten signature. It's done with an email through Submittable, which is very, very impersonal. We know in the first place. Mm-hmm. But so that's the hardest part, to be less than personable to someone, giving them that news. Yeah. And I try to be personable. I'm more lifelike in person anyway than on Zoom. But think about that. And but it's a matter of not being able to be as personable as I would be to answer the question, the responses, or to address the responses that a writer has reading a screen. And I mentioned to you the other day, Rod, how when as a poet I get a lot of rejection, and but I deal with it by giving myself $5 every time I get rejected. And so if I wasn't robbing myself to pay myself, I would be retired now with just rejection money. But that's a way to ease the pain. Have some fun with it. It doesn't mean it's not good work. You mentioned Stephen King. I heard that one book he had was rejected 13 times before it was ever accepted finally. Mm-hmm. And of his early work, I think maybe Night Shift, the collection of short stories. But it doesn't mean it's bad work. It just means it's the right work at the wrong place. And keep polishing, keep being persistent. Yeah, never give up. Right? Yeah. If you're going to try to be a writer, I think you gave me some quick advice not too long ago.
correct me if I'm wrong in quoting you, persistence over impatience. Is that kind of the message that a writer needs to
That was the
absorb?
message. Thank you for listening.
I
Made
do
my day.
All right, so just out of curiosity, how long have you been working with Running Wild Press again?
It's been about 5 years now. That was put back in 2017, maybe six. It started off with they had an announcement looking for novellas, and I had a long poem called "The Cuban" that it was written in stanzas, and I submitted it because it was a story. It was just the format was in stanzas and more poetic in nature, but Lisa Kastner again. She was doing her own editing at that time, so she accepted it, and I remember I sent her an email and said, "Are you sure?"
Wow.
She said, "Yeah, it's what Running Wild Press is all about. It's those stories that don't fit anywhere else or wouldn't be accepted as a novella anywhere else." But she was ready to go with it, so that's where the relationship started with, and the partnership started, and like I say, it's progressed over time to where I'm an acquisition editor now, so you never know.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It really is. Which is always ready. And this comes from a different part of your military background, right?
Yes. I'll hold it up too. It's always ready poems from a life in the United States Coast Guard. Because when I got out of the Army, I went back to school and got the degree, and then I went to the recruiter and said, "Well, I've got a degree now. Will you send me to officer candidate school?" And they said, "Yes, we'd be glad to have you back." And I said, "Well, what will my military occupational specialty be?" And he said, "Well, you were infantry before. You'll be infantry again." I don't know. So I crossed the street and I talked to a Coast Guard recruiter, and she signed me up and said, "We can't send you to officer candidate school right away because we're so small. It takes a while to get there. But come back in enlisted, and you'll do fine. We'll get you to OCS as soon as you can." So I took him up on the deal, and spent 20 years in the Coast Guard, and that's from a life of the Coast Guard perspective. But so there's a lot of the approach to my writing is to see the meaning in even the most mundane events, because there's meaning there. It's human experience, but it's got to be meaningful human experience, or what's the use? And so writing about it is the use, and it pulls out this simple conversation, these simple interchanges between people, or these events that happen, they impact you, and as individuals and humans, they impact us. So it's a series of poems. This is volume 1. I do have volume 2 written, but it's just not published yet. I just got to find a home. I'm hoping to go back to the same folks who published this one, Middle West Press in, I think, Iowa, but the Middle West Press is, I think, if we sell enough, they might be open to printing Always Ready too. So we're hoping. Of memories and of what had happened. They're true. They're all factual, and so it's, in a way, even though they're written as poems, they're really nonfiction, creative nonfiction. So it's that leads me to the it's like a memoir in poem form. So it's a poemoir.
I hope you've enjoyed part 1 of episode 5 of Relax and Chat with Ben White. I thought it was really great. Be sure to look at part 2 of this episode. There's some very fascinating content in that you just don't want to miss. Also, please remember, you can contact me at my email address or my Twitter address if you've written a short story or a novella or a novel published or not, and you'd like to get the word out that you're writing, uh, contact me. Let me know. We'll get you on the show, and the audience will know about you, and you can promote your website, your book, anything you want. So if you're interested, just send me an email or tweet me on Twitter. I hope you have a wonderful day, and don't forget to check out part 2. It's really good.